Hello family, welcome to Jimmy Stories. Please do remember to subscribe, like, leave your thoughts on the comments section, and also share this video. It means the world to us. Thank you as you do so. Now sit back and relax as we dive into this thrilling story briefly. Mia adjusted her apron and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear as the bell above the diner door jingled, signaling the arrival of another customer. It was just another long evening at Benny's Diner, a cozy but worn-out establishment that served as the heartbeat of their small town. The smell of coffee, grease, and pies filled the air. Mia glanced at the clock hanging on the wall. Her shift was far from over. She let out a quiet sigh, rubbing her tired hands, before picking up a tray to deliver orders. Her life was a constant whirlwind of work and responsibilities. As a single mother raising her 5-year-old son, Jordan, she rarely had time for herself. Her days were a cycle of waking up early to prepare breakfast, dropping Jordan off at her neighbor Mrs. Carter's house, and rushing to the diner to work double shifts. She barely made enough to cover rent, daycare fees, and groceries, but somehow, she managed. Mia carried a resilience that came from years of hardship, but it wasn't without cracks. She often found herself thinking about her late father, a man whose laughter used to fill their small living room whenever they watched old Western movies together. He'd sit in his favorite armchair, a bowl of peanuts in his lap, and pat the seat next to him, inviting young Mia to join. "You see that, Mia?" he'd say, pointing at Clint Eastwood on the TV screen. "That man doesn't back down, no matter what. Life will knock you down sometimes, but you've got to get back up. Just like him." Mia could still hear his voice in her head, even years after he passed away. Those westerns were her father's escape from reality, and they became her escape too. Clint Eastwood's quiet strength and unwavering determination became more than just traits of a movie character, they became lessons. One evening, after a particularly busy shift, Mia found herself telling Jordan about her father while tucking him into bed. The boy clung to his stuffed dinosaur, looking up at her with wide, curious eyes. "Did Grandpa like cowboys, Mommy?" he asked, his voice soft and sweet. Mia smiled, brushing his curls back. "He loved cowboys, Jordan. Especially one named Clint Eastwood. Grandpa used to say Clint was the toughest cowboy of them all." "Like a superhero?" Jordan asked, grinning. Mia chuckled. "Something like that. But Grandpa said Clint was different because he didn't need powers to be strong. He used his courage and his wits instead." Jordan's eyes sparkled with fascination. "Do you think I can be strong like that, Mommy?" She leaned down and kissed his forehead. "You already are, sweetheart. You're stronger than you know." The memory warmed Mia's heart as she wiped down a table at the diner. She tried to hold on to that strength, but there were days when it felt like too much. The long hours, the constant juggling of bills, and the pressure of being both mother and father to Jordan weighed heavily on her. Still, she kept pushing forward, fueled by her love for her son and the hope that things would get better. "Mia, table 3 needs a refill," called Benny, the diner's gruff but kind-hearted owner. "Got it," she replied, grabbing the coffee pot. She plastered on a smile as she approached the table, knowing that her customers didn't need to see her exhaustion. It was the same smile she wore every day, one that hid her struggles and kept her moving forward. As the evening wore on, Mia found herself daydreaming about the life she once imagined for herself. She had always loved to paint, but art supplies were a luxury she couldn't afford. Her dreams of becoming an artist felt like a distant memory, buried under the weight of her responsibilities. "Excuse me, miss," a customer interrupted her thoughts. "Can we get the check?" Mia blinked and quickly nodded. "Of course, coming right up." She hurried to the counter, mentally scolding herself for letting her mind wander. There was no time for daydreaming when bills were due, and Jordan needed new shoes. Still, as she handed the check to the customer and returned to the counter, her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Life will knock you down sometimes, but you've got to get back up." Mia gripped the edge of the counter, taking a deep breath. She wasn't sure how she did it some days, but she always managed to get back up. For Jordan, for her late father, and for the little part of her that still believed in a brighter future, she kept going. As the clock inched closer to closing time, Mia glanced at a photo she kept taped to the inside of the counter, a picture of her and Jordan at the park, both of them grinning from ear to ear. It was a reminder of why she worked so hard, even when it felt impossible. "That's my boy," she whispered to herself, smiling softly. "And I'm going to make sure he has everything he needs." Though her body was weary and her dreams felt out of reach, Mia's heart remained steadfast. She had learned from her father, from Clint Eastwood's silent determination, and from her own life that resilience wasn't just about surviving, it was about holding on to hope, even in the toughest times. And that was something she promised herself she would never let go of. It was a quiet evening at Benny's diner, the kind of night where the hum of the neon sign outside seemed louder than the conversations inside. Mia was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door jingled softly. She turned around, her casual glance freezing as her eyes landed on a man walking in. He wasn't just any man, he was Clint Eastwood. Mia's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, she thought her tired mind was playing tricks on her. But as he removed his hat and scanned the room for a seat, there was no mistaking him. The rugged features, the piercing eyes, and that unmistakable air of quiet confidence, it was Clint Eastwood, the legendary actor her father used to talk about with so much admiration. Mia instinctively wiped her hands on her apron, her heart pounding in her chest. What was he doing in their little town, much less at this tiny diner? She watched as he chose a booth near the window in her section. He moved with a calm, deliberate pace, as if he belonged everywhere and nowhere all at once. "Stay cool, Mia," she muttered under her breath, taking a deep breath to steady herself. She grabbed a menu and approached his table, her professional smile firmly in place. "Good evening," she greeted, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Welcome to Benny's Diner. Can I get you something to drink while you look at the menu?" Clint looked up at her, his expression calm and kind. "Coffee," he said in that deep, gravelly voice that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 stories. "Black, if you don't mind." "Of course, right away," Mia replied, her hands gripping the edge of the menu just a little too tightly. She placed it on the table and turned quickly, walking back to the counter as her heart raced. She poured the coffee, her hands trembling slightly as she replayed the moment in her head. It was Clint Eastwood, sitting right there in her section. She couldn't help but think of her late father and how much he would have loved to see this. Her dad used to call Clint a man of few words but great actions, a phrase Mia often thought about when life got hard. Returning to the booth with the coffee, Mia carefully placed the cup on the table. "Here you go, sir. Let me know if you need anything else." Clint nodded, giving her a faint smile. "Thank you." As she walked away, Mia stole a quick glance at him. He seemed so calm, so grounded, yet there was an unmistakable presence about him that filled the room. It reminded her of the characters he played in the old westerns, men who didn't have to shout to command respect. While taking orders at another table, Mia found her mind drifting back to those evenings with her father. They would sit together on the old, lumpy couch, a bowl of peanuts between them, watching movies like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly or Unforgiven. Her dad would lean forward during the tense moments, his voice filled with admiration as he said, "Mia, watch how Clint handles this. Cool, calm, and collected. That's how you face the tough stuff in life." Mia smiled to herself, remembering how she used to roll her eyes back then, thinking it was just dad talk. But now, years later, she realized how much those lessons had stuck with her. Life had thrown plenty of challenges her way, but she had faced them with the same quiet determination her father admired in Clint Eastwood's characters. As the evening wore on, Mia noticed that Clint seemed to be observing everything around him, including her. His gaze wasn't intrusive or uncomfortable, it was thoughtful, almost curious. She wondered what he was thinking. Did he see how hard she was working? Did he notice how much she loved her job even when it was exhausting? Or was he just quietly enjoying his meal, like any other customer? When Mia brought his food to the table, she couldn't resist making a small comment. I hope the food here is better than in those dusty saloons you used to ride into, she said, her smile a mix of nerves and humor. Clint looked up at her, a glimmer of amusement in his eyes. I'll let you know, he replied, his voice carrying that signature dry which she recognized from his movies. Mia chuckled softly as she walked away. It wasn't much, but the small exchange left her feeling lighter. She continued her shift, stealing the occasional glance at Clint as he enjoyed his meal. Despite the initial shock of seeing him, she found herself relaxing. After all, he was just a man, an extraordinary man, yes, but one who had come into her little diner like anyone else. By the time Clint finished his meal, Mia felt a strange mix of emotions. Serving him had brought back so many memories of her father and the lessons he had taught her. Courage, perseverance, and the importance of staying calm under pressure, qualities her father admired in Clint's characters and ones she now tried to embody in her own life. As she cleared the table next to his booth, Clint rose and put on his hat, nodding at her before heading for the door. Mia watched him leave, the bell jingling softly as he stepped out into the night. For a moment, she stood still, her mind buzzing with thoughts. She couldn't explain it, but something about his presence had left an impression on her. Little did she know, the evening wasn't over just yet. Mia noticed the empty booth where Clint Eastwood had been sitting just moments ago. She let out a small sigh, still amazed that such a legendary actor had been her customer that evening. Grabbing a clean rag and a tray, she walked over to clear the table. As she reached for the coffee cup, her eyes caught a neatly folded piece of paper tucked under the plate. Next to it was a stack of bills, a tip far larger than anyone usually left in the diner. Mia froze for a moment, staring at the note. She glanced toward the door, half expecting to see Clint returning, but he was long gone. Biting her lip, she picked up the note, feeling a strange mixture of curiosity and hesitation. What could this be, she murmured to herself. She carefully unfolded the paper, her hands trembling slightly as she began to read. The handwriting was steady, deliberate, and unmistakably personal. Dear Mia, I couldn't help but notice the care and kindness you show to everyone around you, even while working so hard. It's clear you've faced your share of challenges, yet you carry yourself with grace and strength. You remind me of the kind of resilience it takes to persevere through life's trials. Please accept this tip, not as charity, but as recognition of your hard work and the sacrifices you make every day. People like you inspire others to keep going, even when life feels tough. Never forget that your efforts matter, not just to your son, but to everyone lucky enough to cross your path. Stay strong, and remember, sometimes even cowboys need a little help. Warm regards. Clint Eastwood. As Mia finished, her vision blurred with tears. She clutched the note tightly, her body shaking as the weight of his words sank in. Looking down at the tip, more money than she could have earned in weeks, she felt overwhelmed by a mix of gratitude and disbelief. She whispered, "Thank you," her voice breaking as tears spilled freely down her cheeks. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen, and it gave her a spark of hope she thought she had lost forever. Mia sat on the edge of her bed that night, Clint's note carefully folded in her hands as if it were the most fragile and precious thing she'd ever held. The generous tip he had left sat neatly in an envelope on her bedside table. For what felt like the 100th time, she read his words again, each line filling her with a mixture of awe, gratitude, and an unfamiliar sense of hope. She ran her fingers over the handwritten lines, hearing his gravelly voice in her mind as if he had spoken directly to her. The weight of the moment finally hit her. She let out a deep breath, her eyes filling with tears once again, but this time, they weren't tears of exhaustion or defeat. They were tears of relief, of joy, and of a possibility she hadn't dared to imagine for years. That evening, after locking up the diner and picking Jordan up from Mrs. Carter's house, she brought her son home as usual. But tonight, there was a lightness in her step. Jordan noticed it immediately. "Mommy, are you okay?" he asked as she tucked him into bed. His small hands gripped the edge of his blanket, his bright eyes scanning her face with innocent curiosity. Mia smiled, sitting beside him and brushing his curls back from his forehead. "I'm more than okay, Jordan," she said softly. Something special happened today. What happened? Jordan's curiosity deepened, his voice tinged with excitement. Well, she hesitated, unsure how to explain the gravity of the moment to a 5-year-old. You remember I told you about Grandpa's favorite cowboy, Clint Eastwood? Jordan nodded eagerly. The strong one from the movies? That's right, Mia said, her smile widening. He came to the diner tonight. He sat at one of my tables. Jordan's mouth fell open in amazement. The real Clint Eastwood? Like, the real one? Yes, the real one, Mia said, laughing at his reaction. And, Jordan, he did something very kind for us. What did he do? Jordan whispered, leaning closer. Mia thought for a moment, then reached for Clint's note, holding it up. He wrote me a letter and left a gift that will help us a lot. It means I can work less, spend more time with you, and maybe I can start painting again. Jordan's eyes lit up. Really, Mommy? You're going to paint? Like the pictures you used to show me? Mia nodded, tears threatening to spill again. Yes, sweetheart. I think I can now. Jordan threw his arms around her neck, hugging her tightly. I'm so happy, Mommy. Grandpa would be happy too. Mia hugged him back, holding him close as her heart swelled with gratitude. She kissed his forehead and whispered, yes, Grandpa would be very happy. And I'm happy because I have you. That night, after Jordan had fallen asleep, Mia stayed awake, sitting at the small kitchen table where she usually went over bills and worried about the future. But tonight, the table wasn't covered in overdue notices or receipts. Instead, it held a blank sheet of paper and a pencil she hadn't picked up in years. With Clint's note tucked safely beside her, she began to sketch. Her hand moved tentatively at first, the lines shaky as she tried to remember the feel of the pencil against the page. But soon, the hesitation faded, replaced by a steady rhythm. Her strokes grew bolder, more confident, as she poured her emotions into the drawing. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, a step toward reclaiming a piece of herself she thought she'd lost forever. In the following days, Mia used the money Clint had left to settle her overdue bills and purchase a small set of art supplies. She cut back her hours at the diner, giving herself more time to spend with Jordan and to rediscover her passion for painting. Slowly but surely, her kitchen table transformed into an artist's workspace, cluttered with paints, brushes, and canvases. Word of Clint Eastwood's visit to the diner spread through the small town, and while many were amazed by the story, Mia chose to keep the details of his gesture private. It wasn't about the fame or the recognition, it was about the quiet kindness of a stranger who had seen her struggle and chosen to help without expecting anything in return. One evening, as Mia worked on a new painting, Jordan sat beside her with his crayons, creating his own masterpiece. He looked up at her and said, "Mommy, you're like a cowboy too." Mia paused, smiling at him. Oh? How's that? Because you're strong and brave, just like the cowboy in Grandpa's movies. Mia's chest tightened with emotion, and she reached over to ruffle his hair. Thank you, Jordan. But you know what? I think you're the real cowboy here. You've been so brave through everything. As she hugged her son that night, Mia reflected on how one unexpected moment had changed everything. Clint's gesture wasn't just about the money or the note, it was about reminding her that kindness and compassion still existed in the world. It was about giving her the courage to believe in herself again. For the first time in years, Mia felt something she thought she'd lost forever, hope.